Hi, and welcome. I'm Maury Weinstein, president and co-founder of SystemSource. Today, we're talking about introducing AI, focusing on Microsoft's Copilot and ChatGPT offerings. ChatGPT, obviously a separate firm from Microsoft. It just reads like it's Microsoft, but two separate sets of offerings. And I've left my phone number, which you're welcome to reach any time, and my email address. If there's something you're hearing that I need to know about, do not hesitate. Joining us today is Michelle Robinson, a 30-year veteran of SystemSource, who runs our Learning Center and will talk to us more about training at the end of our presentation, also about prompt engineering. Thanks, Michelle, for joining us. The agenda is in front of you. We'll do a lot about understanding the differences. Microsoft using the word Copilot at this point interchangeably among many pieces of the product line. We'll take a quick look at that also. Comparing Copilot and ChatGPT, we'll do a demo if all the stars aligned. Image creation, we'll take a quick look, and Michelle will help us with prompt engineering and AI training. We hope you're enjoying your pizza. If you haven't received your pizza, contact Mike Jones at mjones@syssource.com. Thanks, Mike, for putting together today's event. During the webinar, don't hesitate to submit your questions in the question box, and we'll have the presentation slides and the webinar recording links emailed to you. Afterwards, you are in presentation mode. There is a big crowd today, so we couldn't open up the microphones. I thought we'd go to commercial for 20 seconds, and then we'll get right into the meat of our presentation. SystemSource is a group of 70 involved in lots of areas of maturing IT and audiovisual services. So we use the training center, courtesy of Michelle, to handle a lot of increase in productivity, preparation for the future, minimizing disruption among the staff during certain changes like Office 365 migrations and so on. All of that is done inside our Learning Center, including all the technical and development courses too. We train about 700 people a month, and actually you'll see some of the output of that in today's presentation if all the stars are aligned during our demo. Presentation Systems is a group of about a dozen people. All we do is auditoriums and Teams, conference rooms, huddle rooms, all of that and more is in our Presentation Systems group. Consulting is where we keep our heavy hitters technically. These folks do our security analysis, all of our migrations, all of our cloud migrations are done. The average tenure in that group is 26 years. Cloud services is code word for our data center. We've been running a data center in our Hunt Valley headquarters since '95, but most of our current work, of course, is done at AWS and Azure. Service and support can be done two different directions. One is reactively, where you call us when it all falls apart. We do some of that work, but nearly all of our support work today is done in the managed IT services area, which is loaded with proactive thoughts. If we maintain efficiently enough, there may be enough money left over in the budget to refresh the environment once in a while. We do have a configuration facility and warehouse here in our Hunt Valley headquarters. And that's SystemSource today. On behalf of the 70 of us, so we say thank you. And don't hesitate to join us for a museum tour sometime. There's over 1,000 pieces on the floor of our museum. It is fun, and we do give museum tours sort of around the clock. If you want to reserve off business hours, we're happy to have a tour guide for you. So let's jump right in. Microsoft, you heard me say, using Copilot in many ways. So let's take a look at a couple of the ones that hit our world closest. One is Copilot, which was previously Bing Chat Enterprise and Bing Chat. So those words are no longer being used, and the word Copilot has replaced that. That was about maybe 3/4 of a year ago or so. Then there's Copilot from Microsoft 365 that I suspect all of you know something about. And those are the two Copilots that come closest to our world. There is a column here for personal use of Copilot, and there's a column here for corporate and work use. And that all of you know is the Entra ID, which is the business and work password in Microsoft's terms. So there is a very key difference between those, and that is commercial data protection not provided when using personal credentials. When you're using business and work credentials, the commercial data protection is provided. And of course, the distinct difference, the difference between Copilot and Copilot for Microsoft 365 is generally in the apps area. That means Copilot for Microsoft 365 looks across your apps. You are getting a late version of the large language model. That's the GPT-4 version. Reminder that Microsoft has invested $10 billion early into OpenAI. So that's why they're using OpenAI as their back end. So you're using GPT-4 and DALL-E 3. So you're using rather late versions of the ChatGPT models. Over here on the right-hand side, Copilot for Microsoft 365 uses the turbo version. That change occurred in April 2nd of this year. So you got late versions of the large language models. There's nothing cheap or cut rate about Copilot. And let's drill it down a little bit more in the Copilot side, and then we'll drill it down in the Copilot for Microsoft 365 side. So here's Copilot, and you know where to access it. It's got a personal side and a work and business side. You know you can access it through Windows 11. They also added 10 to that too. You can access it through the various websites. You can access it through the browsers. Now, we remember from the prior slide that on the personal side, everything is public. So when you put data in, when you put queries in, when you put the prompts in that Michelle's going to help train us a little bit on later on today, everything is public. On the right-hand side, using your business or work credentials, which you know is Entra ID, the data is not used for model training. It's not saved, and Microsoft can't access it. Now, there are a couple exceptions. We got to keep an eye on. K through 12 students are not part of this, what they call commercial data protection. And the government cloud customers are not yet part of it also. They said sometime in the future, they must have some regulatory issues. There's probably not a technical issue here on the K through 12 and the what Microsoft calls GCC, the government cloud customers. IT admins cannot access chat history. So you are seeing distinct differences between the personal and the Entra ID, that's the left-hand side, versus the right. Now, remember that this Copilot, using the word for everything at Microsoft, and you're going to see a lot more of it today, has two sides to it. It's excellent for branding, a little confusing for those that have to buy licensing, and that's you and me. Every mention of the word Copilot is probably worth $2 or $3 to Microsoft's stock price too. So they've obviously centralized that and killed off a lot of the other terms, including Bing Chat. In this case, the knowledge of AI knows nothing about you or your organization. So that's a distinction between Copilot and Copilot for 365, which you'll see in the next slide. The personal Copilot is free, and using the Entra ID, which gives you the commercial data protection, you need one of the underlying licenses that you see in the bottom right-hand corner in front of you. And this list encompasses nearly all the existing licenses. So let's move on to Copilot for Microsoft 365. They actually have it now in two versions. One is for individuals on the left-hand side, which could be interesting for those of us learning, and the Copilot for Microsoft 365 that you've read a lot about on the right-hand side. The credentials are Microsoft 365 Business or Family, or the Entra ID on the right-hand side, which you know is the work or Office credentials. You can access it through the apps, and it's quite comprehensive through the apps, at least on the right-hand side, the Microsoft 365 version. They're covering extensive amount of the product line, including Loop, including Whiteboard, including OneNote. So there's nothing rolling out slowly here. They've got a pretty comprehensive access to your data through Copilot for Microsoft 365. The Copilot Pro, which again is the individual side on the left-hand side, does have the commercial data protection, and so of course does the right-hand side. You do still have the exceptions on the government cloud and the K through 12 students. Higher ed students, you do get commercial data protection on. So the individuals, AI will know you, but won't know your organization. That's saved for the right-hand side, Copilot for Microsoft 365. You are getting the latest model, or one of the latest models, that's ChatGPT 4 Turbo. The dollars involved are on the bottom, $20 a month. That is available monthly. That's a monthly license. And you have to have the underlying 365 personal or family subscription. But I suspect most of you came to learn more about the right-hand side, and there you need these underlying licenses. These underlying licenses on the bottom right-hand corner have expanded over time. We should note that the licensing is annual only. There is no monthly version of Microsoft for Copilot for Microsoft 365, and they want a much higher commitment level from the users, so that they don't offer a tentative monthly license. Those users tend to be too tentative. They're looking for a much stronger commitment. It's actually one of the few licenses, if not the only, that is not available on a monthly basis. That's $30 a month on the right-hand side, $20 on the left-hand side, and that gives you a quick picture of the Microsoft product line. Hopefully you saw something new that you can sink your teeth into today. But let's wander over to the ChatGPT options. ChatGPT.com is the website. They're actually using that now instead of OpenAI, which is the parent company. Comes in 4 pieces: free, plus, team, and enterprise. I'll be using my plus license today, and that is the $20 a month license. The team license does give you the admin console, which in some of the larger organizations, or if you've rolled it out to a substantial number of people, would be very helpful. And that's a $25, $30 license, depending on whether you're buying it monthly or yearly. We don't sell the ChatGPT licenses. You'll go direct for that. The enterprise is by quotation, although the numbers, I think, center around the $60 a month level per person. That does have the SOC 2 compliance in it, which is important to certain regulatory and certain organizations. And there are different cap usage. Now, you know the intensive use in Copilot or ChatGPT, the computing is very intensive, and that's why they're building so many data centers. And that's why these are not cheap subscriptions. The computing behind it is extensive. Of course, it's all at Azure, both on the ChatGPT side and the Copilot side. So when you hit return with your prompt, you're warming one of their data centers for sure. And that's why they do cap usage. Those usage caps, you can see the approximate marker here. They do change depending on what time of day. Some of them do change because peak period, they have to throttle some of the usages. But you do have unlimited usage here on the right-hand side if that was affordable. So you do have various caps. You've got higher caps. You've got unlimited usage. So one of the differences between the package is the availability, especially during the business day. You do have a difference here in data security. You have a manual on-off for free and plus. I'll show you how to turn it on and off if you're not familiar with it. And with the team and enterprise, they are on by default. One of the differences that you'll see is the custom GPTs start on the plus version. You actually see some custom GPTs if the stars aligned and my demos work properly today. So now you get a better understanding of the different options. There are different models involved, and the ChatGPT 4.0, O is for Omni. Omni means different inputs and outputs, like voice, like text, like image. So O is the latest, I wouldn't say it's the latest model, but it's the latest introduction, it's the latest feature set, and that is rolling out over teams and enterprise, but has not gotten there yet, as far as I can tell. My tenant has the ChatGPT 4.0 in it, but does not have the voice. My son's a heavy tech guy. He offered to call his buddies over at OpenAI, but I told him he didn't have to do that. The 4.0 has finally gotten the latency of the voice back and forth down to around 2.0 seconds, 2.3-ish seconds. So for the first time, we're able to see conversational OpenAI using voice, because if you're running latency more than 2 or 3 or 4 seconds, it becomes very stilted. But ChatGPT 4.0 has taken it down to the 2.3 second area. But I won't be able to demonstrate that today because I don't have that in my tenant. Hopefully that sheds some light on the ChatGPT options. There was some mystery around this, and they've rolled these out one by one, so that you had to sort of study the web page pretty hard to understand all this. Hopefully I've captured it properly in a single table. If you'd like a comparison, which I promised today in today's agenda, Copilot versus ChatGPT. So the Copilot folks would probably be the ones who like the fact that the responses are footnoted for easy sourcing. If you've used Copilot, and again, it's free, if you have the entry ID, if you've got the underlying licenses, you've noted that usually 4 or 5 sources are put on the bottom of the results. I find those helpful rather than just unknown data coming into your screen. and of course, you can click those sources in order to get better source verification. So they do have a bit of advantage in that area. There is a difference in cutoff date, but like everything in AI, it's pretty complicated. The cutoff date for Microsoft Copilot is 4/23. That means that it's learned what it can from the internet through that date. ChatGPT is later for the GPT-4 Turbo option, which you know is part of the Enterprise and Teams packages. However, Copilot also is fully up to date because it's basically using the old Bing engine for web search. ChatGPT includes the Copilot-based web search, like we just talked about, using a plugin that's available only for the paid packages. So there is a difference there. You have to think about that. Sometimes you want late information. If you're looking for the latest NBA finals or whatever, you won't find that with an early cutoff or any cutoff before last week or whatever. I haven't been following them carefully. So that's the learning. The learning's been done through month 4 and month 12 respectively. However, there are web search options within there. They've been trying to integrate the web search portion and the large language model. So if you want to use ChatGPT 4, which is the latest learning model for free, that's within Copilot. More visual features. If you've done some searches using Copilot, you know it does return some pictures. And it also uses voice prompts, image generation, shopping assistance, image inputs. All of that is part of Copilot. So they're leapfrogging each other, but this is probably the current comparison. You might choose ChatGPT, which I have just out of habit, probably at this point. I was an early user. If you wanted the free advanced chatbot, which includes the low latency back and forth, or will shortly, and that's a GPT-4o for Omni. It is the most popular AI chatbot at the moment, and they did get an early start, of course. ChatGPT is out for more than a year, probably at the 2-year mark already. So it's a little more mature at this point. But either way, what I think would help our organizations. But I just want to give you a quick look at some of the differences so you can make your own determination. Now we're going to see whether the stars aligned and take a quick look at some demoing. So let's see what we can do. Okay. So we've got to keep in mind that AI does give us a challenge, and we're starting to understand a little better as some of us fool around with it. But there is a very larger, much bigger picture going on. And Tesla and Musk have talked about it as that Tesla, Musk says, is not a car company, it's a robot company. And AI is lending robots some interesting functionality. This is a Tesla robot in front of you. There is no sound, so don't worry about that. You can see the selection and the sorting going on. This is all autonomous at 1x, so it's not being sped up. And now they've spun it up to 6x and 20x. What they're really showing you here is look at the balance on the legs. So this robot is standing up on its own, which we think is easy. But so if you want to move quickly, you've got a balance to think about. It's also learning on its own. In this case, it's finding, and here it makes a mistake, recovers autonomously from the mistake. So I'm just trying to give you a bigger picture as to where AI is leading us. Here, the robot is walking. Here you can see in one of Tesla's factories, starting to see some introduction, and they like that the robot walks around the office too. So that gives you a little bigger picture of what we're in for. And there are various, there's a Boston firm, Boston Dynamics, and also Tesla with the lead in this area. So let's take that off the screen. Let's move on to image. All of us probably have played with DALL-E 3. And in this case, I decided to make it a little bigger for you. I just created a picture of people having fun eating a pizza during a webinar during the Stone Age. And this is what you see in front of you. I'll make it bigger. We can also edit it, of course, save it. We can do anything we want with it. I suspect all of us played in this area, but I have talked to business owners who are doing significant, especially low-end graphics work manually still. And you can imagine this may either cut costs or give you better graphics or something. But doing it manually, of course, is the old way of doing it now. So hopefully you'll have some fun with that. Let's move on to perhaps a custom GPT. Remember, this is only with the plus version of the OpenAI ChatGPT product. And let's use something near and dear to Michelle. And let's look at Learning Center satisfaction. Now, Michelle delivers maybe 700, 800 courses a month, and of course we've done so since 1983. So we've trained over 300,000 people, and we probably have customer satisfaction data on most of those folks. In this case, I took about 2,600 comments, and I wanted to see, this is the Bits and Bytes training, which is the 1-hour sessions, non-hands-on that Michelle offers virtually. And I want to see what's happening in those sessions. Now, Michelle and I do this manually with her staff and have done so for many years each quarter. It is a significant amount of time in prepping and so on. Let's see whether ChatGPT can shortcut that by doing some data analysis. So let's ask it to graph overall customer student satisfaction over time and include a linear average in a different color. See what it comes up with. So it's looking across a spreadsheet that has, I think, 3,600 line items or so. And it's thinking, it's analyzing at the moment. So all we did was upload this file using the upload paperclip that you can see right in front of you in the bottom middle left-hand corner. Really, any data format works. It first analyzes the columns and sees whether it understands them. Well, it worked. It worked this morning. So let's just try it one more time, maybe uncomplicating it. Graph student satisfaction for one of our instructors. We'll call her Dr. R. Perhaps I made the prompt a little too complicated. Let's see what it does with it. Okay, well, it's not cooperating. It did it an hour ago, but I think I can probably back in right up top here and see if I have it. I've got it right in front of me. So this was the prompt. I used talking about creating the chart of satisfaction for Dr. R, one of our instructors, and putting a linear average on it. And there's the data in front of you since 2022. So it looked across 3,600 data points, multiple instructors, lots of student comments, a lot of free form comments, and it did come up with this information. Maybe it'll be more cooperative if we say provide customer student sentiments for Dr. R. It's looking across thousands of comments to find the right instructor and to summarize them. So in data analysis, it could be a real time saver, if not advancing the state of the art in data analysis. Positive comments, suggestions for improvements. It summarized it for you, and hopefully you've enjoyed a little bit of demo on that. That is the ChatGPT for the Learning Center. Now let's say we own a cellular telephone company, and we're part of the customer service group, part of the call center. So I've told ChatGPT that it is a part of the call center for cellular telephone company, and that we'd like to return our cell phone due to early battery issues, and see what it says about it. It says we're eligible for a free return or exchange, tells us what to do. I think some of you are starting to see the future here in call center activity. And I might have a question like, can you provide expedited return shipping at no charge for replacement? And let's see what it says. It says we typically cover the cost of standard shipping, and could I provide the information? Well, that's fairly standard stuff. You may have done the same thing, or perhaps you're prototyping it in your own operations. However, take a look at what happens next. So I'm going to add a policy manual, because right now it says a replacement expedited freight is no charge to the customer. But my company is pretty cheap, and maybe my policy says otherwise. So I'm going to add the policy to the custom chat GPT and ask the same question. So I've added a policy document, just taken off my desktop, and I say now, can you provide expedited shipping for my cell phone replacement? So it's checking everything it knows, everything that's on the web through whatever date, and the policy. And then it comes back and says, according to our policy, we do not offer expedited shipping for phone returns. Now, one could say, well, Maury, you made it easy because all you did is you told it in a Word file that I uploaded that expedited shipping is not offered to clients. However, I made it a little more challenging than that. So I decided to feed ChatGPT the Declaration of Independence with one line in the middle that says our policy is not to offer expedited shipping on phone returns. So it read the whole document and picked up on the policy. So it's pretty smart, and I think some of you are starting to think, I suspect, of what could be done in the future, especially since call centers overseas and changes in policy are very rarely done well in the same sentence. It's not easy, but you can start to see what's happening in front of you. Now remember, I can do this in 30 languages, and the costs involved are doing it are fairly small from an operations point of view. So I think you're starting to see some of the future here, both in robotics and in call center activity and in data analysis. And that is and of course, image creation too, which has been available for some time. So let's get back to the presentation. And just a reminder on the fifth bullet there are starting to be some serious academic analyses of various AI analysis or AI functionality. Don't hesitate to read those to see what others have done before you. In this particular case, financial statement analysis was made and was perfected at a much higher level than humans using the large language model. And there is some research behind it. You can click this link to find out for those of you who are in the financial area. But you can imagine that an unbiased or lesser biased reader like ChatGPT or any of the AI engines might give you an advantage in financial statement analysis for stock investing or for credit gathering or making loan decisions. All of that perhaps can be done best without the human bias involved. And you can read that for more information. There is a new feature in ChatGPT called memory. This memory feature does remember things about you. So I've told ChatGPT that I'm a business owner and I like precise writing. I just made that up. And that actually is under the settings personalization. If you haven't seen it, it's a fairly new feature, just a couple months old at most. And it's within the ChatGPT product. It used to be part of only the Plus bundle, so you had to pay for it, but today it's part of at least the free and Plus, probably part of the other bundles too. So it carries what it learns between chats. So it's a bigger picture than just individual chats. It's learning and it's from you, and you're making descriptions of what the work that you want to do, covering between chats rather than individual chats. You can restart it from scratch. You can turn off the feature. You can look at specific memories. All that is part of the personalization option. And then you go to, actually it's settings and then personalization in the ChatGPT product. You just click on your name in the bottom left-hand corner. Securing Copilot is slightly controversial. There are some large institutions, especially here in town, that have turned off Copilot for some users or maybe all. And I did leave you a link to talk more about that. It's not something that's part of today's agenda, but if you're facing a decision whether to turn on or off Copilot for groups or individuals, don't hesitate to read that article first. That has been subject to revision over time. Hopefully that's helpful. There is, if you're using the free product for ChatGPT, that's the $0 free product. If you're not parting with the $20, if maybe you're just doing some group training or something, you can set the chat history and training to off, and then it will not ingest your data, your spreadsheets, whatever you provided, or your prompts. It won't ingest any of that. Now, do know that it doesn't sync across browsers or devices, so there may be multiple points that you have to disable. Remember that different points, entry points might be the mobile app, the Bing, the Edge, Windows 11 or Windows 10. So there are multiple ways into Copilot. Now this is a ChatGPT function, but Copilot does have something similar, and it doesn't sync across all the different entry points. So you have to think about that when you're securing either product. The Verizon report is out this year. Some of you know we look at the Verizon report very carefully at System Source for our managed customers, and we do have public webinars on it. There will be one coming up. I did digest the 100 pages of the Verizon report. It's not bedtime reading, but there's a little humor in there someplace, somewhere. And I did put it into an hour or less presentation. That will be coming up shortly, actually. In the next month and a half, we'll have that on our webpage or watch your email screens. One of the slides came out of that. Verizon asks some interesting questions each year. Of course, only they have the data, so that only they can answer the questions, especially in an unbiased manner. So that's why we rely on them almost exclusively out of the hundreds of surveys and studies that cross your email screen each year. In this particular case, they kept an eye out for any indication that using AI is implicit in the security attacks. So is AI being used in the security attacks? Turns out that not much materialized. So you can see that in the turquoise line. There are some mentions of AI alongside attack types. Now what they did is they were Googling or using ChatGPT or Copilot for combination of the words phishing and AI, malware, vulnerability in AI, ransomware and AI. Turns out the number of terms are very low. They said shockingly low. However, there are plenty of uses of the Gen AI terms. Some of them are in non-consensual pornography and other areas that obviously are not healthy but are somewhat dominant in some uses of AI. So in terms of security, we did not see much of that, at least through January 2024, in the eyes of the Verizon report. Now, Verizon says, I wonder why that's true. It turns out what Verizon says is, well, some of the hackers are doing so well that they really don't need AI. They're reading and writing English much better than they used to be. They're fairly effective. There's plenty of zero-day vulnerabilities for them to attack, and maybe they really don't need it. So it's one interesting take on use of AI and security. Now, there is one exception Verizon found, and that is the deep fake technology, where there's been quite a bit of reported fraud. One of your CFOs joins a conference call. He or she thinks that they're talking to colleagues about a money wire transfer for a new investment, a secret investment that the boss has brought them into. However, the other people on the conference call or video call are not their colleagues. They just look like them and they sound like them. Those are the deep fake technologies, and I actually wrote our managed clients fairly recently about one in Hong Kong, where a high-level financial executive joined a meeting, and the meeting appeared to have their colleagues in it. Turned out it wasn't them, and it was just made up. It was artificial intelligence at its worst. And the financial executive, who was quite skeptical, did wire $25 million the wrong direction. I mentioned that Copilot is being used extensively in the world of Microsoft. This is some of the ways it's being used. So let's not get confused. Today we're talking about Microsoft 365 Copilot and the old Bing Chat Enterprise, which they've changed to the word Copilot. This is an older slide, and I couldn't find a newer slide to cover this that had any readability to it. But there's lots of other uses of the word Copilot. Don't get mixed up in it. Copilot's being used heavily in the dynamics area. One area of Copilot that has really caught the interest of the world is the GitHub Copilot, where it's being used in dev circles to produce much higher quality code at a much higher rate. The Security Copilot is down the bottom, which is actually a fairly recent introduction. Security Copilot largely is for those that have used the Microsoft Lighthouse software, so it's a fairly small set so far. So ensuring the right data controls is an important answer to some of your questions as to how to get started with Copilot for Microsoft 365. From a baseline point of view, you turn on MFA, which I suspect all of you have turned on, and audit logging, and everyone's fairly happy. This indicates the E3 license, but you'll see in subsequent slides that Business Premium and other license types are being mentioned. But I suspect you're going to want to move to the core security or best-in-class security, which just plainly is hard work. And you'll need more licensing. Here it uses the M365 E3 license, plus a SharePoint Advanced Management license. And it involves a lot of conditional access, which many of you know is CA, which you know involves some complications, a lot of manual sensitivity labeling, that's labeling of data manually, to tell SharePoint how sensitive it is. A lot of DLP policies. Many of you haven't spent serious time in that area. We know because we can see through the eyes of our managed clients. So that is a fairly big step from baseline. And again, answering your question as to where to get started, if you're going to be making use and use of 365 Microsoft Copilot across especially sensitive data environments, and very few of us have environments where there's no sensitive data, including HR and so on, you'll want to move to either core or best in class. And I suspect you want to start today on it because it does take time and there is extensive licensing involved. Some of you have M365 E5 licensing, but not many. There's where you get automatic application of sensitivity labels, where there's your data leakage. And that data leakage, by the way, includes, you can actually tell Microsoft using the advanced licensing that you're going to have a termination in 2 weeks on this person. It actually has a different sensitivity for that person for the next 2 weeks until they're terminated. So that there's some, and that area, according to Verizon, is a very sensitive area when people know they're leaving and some data gets leaked because of that. So those are 3 levels. Now, you can see that you may have already achieved those levels. Very few clients have, and you may be ready to deploy M365 in a production sense. We do have clients that are playing with it in a test or learning sense. Now, if you're not ready to deploy, Microsoft has just put in a fairly new option called restrictive SharePoint search. And Microsoft's very upfront with it by saying this is a temporary option that gives you time to address what they call oversharing. That's the key word, oversharing concerns. Oversharing means you didn't put the right controls in place so everyone can see everything, which in most organizations certainly would be inappropriate. You can see the required license types I made reference to earlier. It's not just Office 365 E3. The M365 Business Standard or Premium counts also. But it doesn't take you to best in class. That's where the M365 E3 licenses come in. Those licenses are not inexpensive. So if you are using that, if you're at the core level or best in class, you can disable the restricted SharePoint search. But that is, and you can see the availability is right now. I think it's been issued. I didn't double check before today's presentation. But if you're concerned in any way about unintentional oversharing, that's the official term at Microsoft, you'll want to turn on the restricted SharePoint search, at least temporarily. Now, once you turn that on, all the organization-wide search disappears. So you'll be limited to a set of SharePoint sites as well as the individual's files and content. And this drills down a little bit more on the right-hand side. The allowed list of sites is up to 100 SharePoint sites. And the user data is the user's OneDrive for Business, chats they were part of, emails they sent and received, calendars that they have access to. So there is some amount of access to data, certainly enough to test it with, but the organization-wide searches would be off during a restricted SharePoint search. And in today's deck, which you'll get a copy of later on this afternoon, there is more information about the core path. A lot of the stuff that, well, you and I may have been avoiding, like the purview audits, like DLP policies, like manually labeling emails and documents with some of the sensitivity labels. Some of those things our organizations have not gotten involved in. It's expensive, it's very time consuming, could require advanced licensing, training, and so on, but may be on the path if you're going to make great use organization-wide of 365 Microsoft Copilot. This is the best-in-class piece. This is where you get some of the automatic application of those sensitivity labels. And you're getting into compliance policies, retention labels, and so on. Not an easy area of Microsoft licensing. I'm going to jump right now to today's agenda talks about the comparison between Microsoft Teams Premium, which last time I checked was a $7 a month license, and you just need it for the Teams meeting organizers, and Copilot for Microsoft 365. It turns out there's one overlap between them, and that overlap is called Intelligent Recap. And Intelligent Recap is available in both license types, Teams Premium, and also Copilot for Teams, which is part of the 365 Microsoft Copilot product line. The Intelligence Recap is here on the left-hand side. It's available only after the meeting, and you can see that the right-hand side, which you get in Teams if you buy the 365 Microsoft Copilot, is more real-time. So actually, during the meeting, you're able to see if you've joined late or you're looking at various meetings at the same time. You can have some unique prompts, including where was I mentioned, and so on, as the meeting takes place. So we use it here internally. At least we use the Teams Premium piece here internally. And one of our engagement managers was working with Rich Glenn, who you know runs our services operations, and was talking about PowerShell scripts, this, that, and the other thing. This is a verbatim cut of that conversation summary. It summarized it beautifully. So it's coming a long way. It's getting better and better all the time. This is just one of the action items that it picked up during the meeting. This is unedited. It does have the follow-up tasks here also through the whole meeting. I only put one action item here just to conserve your eyesight. So I would recommend contacting one of us or wherever your licensing source is. We do sell about $2 million a year of Microsoft licensing here at System Source. It's not an easy area, and especially to do it well with co-term licenses and so on. Microsoft 365 AI for executives. This slide is here only because if you're in charge of presenting this to your internal audience, slides are available for executives, HR, finance folks, and operations folks, and so on. So I'm not going to go through this, but just to let you know that if you'd like, we can give you this deck, so you don't have to you don't have to prepare your own. How executives would use Word in revision, how they would use Copilot to create presentation slides, a day in the life of an executive. Again, I'm just having this thing as a placeholder because it is a medium popular request for this piece of the slide deck so that you don't have to recreate these slides if you're presenting internally. We're going to move right to training and prompt engineering. Michelle's going to take us across the finish line, but just know that you probably don't have AI folks sitting on the bench, so you probably want to consider developing them internally. Of course, training does satisfy early adopters. We don't want to frustrate that 5% of the audience that wants to learn fast and learn early. And getting an early start, you heard today that might be worth doing, especially in the SharePoint area, because some of those are prerequisites for organization-wide use of M365 for Copilot. Michelle, take it away, starting with prompt engineering. What do you have for us?
Great, thanks so much, Maury, and thank you all for giving us this opportunity to talk a little bit about prompt engineering. Many of you have probably played around with ChatGPT or Copilot, and have received varying results. One of the things we'd want to talk about is just the importance of a well-defined input when you're working with an AI model. So putting together an AI model, working with an AI model is kind of like working with an inexperienced assistant. No matter how inexperienced they are, if they're intelligent, they're still going to ask clarifying questions when they don't understand a task. But your AI model is probably not going to do that unless you prompt it to. So think of it, instead of using programming languages, AI uses prose. So it's all in the input that you put in your prompt. So remember back in math class when we talked about garbage in equals garbage out? The same thing is going to hold true here. So for instance, if you put into your AI model that you want to make a chocolate cake and you have tomatoes, onions, and basil on hand, you're not going to have a very tasty chocolate cake if those are the ingredients that you put together for AI to generate a recipe for. It will generate a chocolate cake recipe, but it will use those ingredients. So think about it that way. Essentially, the quality of your output really is going to depend on the clarity of your input, how concise it is, how specific it is, and then thinking also about talking to a stranger. So if you go up to a stranger, you know nothing about that person. You have to use clear and concise wording. Otherwise, you can get confusion. Also, context. Just like in a conversation, too little context can lead to confusion and misunderstanding, but too much context can also confuse your audience. So choosing just the right amount. And then, of course, also creativity. Sometimes we really need a creative response, but sometimes we don't. It really depends on the problem that we're trying to solve. So in thinking about your prompt parameters, you can consider three main things that we want to look at. Temperature is one. So consider 0 being completely concise, straightforward, to the point, and 1 being creative. So depending on whether you want a creative output, you can choose your temperature by saying to your AI model, or setting in your settings whether you want precise or balanced or maybe more creative. Also, max tokens. It's unlike a Google search where we just write in, tell me about World War II. What you can do in ChatGPT is tell me about World War II in 2 paragraphs of 5 sentences each. And that allows you to get the output that you're looking for rather than just an output of lots of data that's not useful to you. And as you go along, then iterating. So you can put in, this is what I'm looking to do. It doesn't quite return the result that you wanted, so you iterate until you do get the result that you're looking for. The great thing is that you can always go back and look at your prior outputs to form the one that's best for you. And as we look at that, some of the things that you can consider are using clear action verbs. For instance, generate, write, perform. These kinds of outputs are going to give you the desired result in the end. It helps the AI know your intent. So write a poem. Well, that's great, but what do you want your poem to be about? So be specific about your desired outcome. If you want to calculate the circumference of a circle, then tell AI, I want you to calculate the circumference of a circle that's 5 centimeters. And then you can be very specific about it. And then experiment with different approaches. If it's not generating exactly what you want, try rephrasing, provide a little bit more context. Use a script, use a template that tells AI what you want it to do when you give it some commands. Do you want AI to come back and ask you more questions? Tell AI that's what you want, is to help you refine your approach until you get what you're looking for. So the building blocks, just to kind of take you through. You've got your prompt inputs. You've got your configurable parameters, so your temperature and how much space you want, how much time, how many sentences you're looking for. And then you've got your outputs. AI has been a great tool just to use for simple things like generate a course outline for a new course I want to put together. Used that quite a few times, or help me to develop a job description for a new role that I have in my organization. Lots of great things. As a matter of fact, I just used it last week to write a formula that I could not figure out in Excel. So a lot of great things that you can use that for in everyday work, whether you're using ChatGPT, Copilot, Windows 11 Copilot, or Copilot for 365. Let's take a look real quick at I curated a small list of courses for you. I have to tell you, we have 59 different AI specific course titles. And through those 59, we have 259 sessions of those courses scheduled. And those are just the AI titles that are strictly AI, not the titles that include AI. But so there's a lot out there for you, and I couldn't fit all of that on one slide, but what we have here, a brand new course that we put together is AI for Educators, and that's coming up on August 9th, really working with educators and how to use AI responsibly in the classroom and working with their students. Our ChatGPT hands-on course has just, it feels it runs full every time we run it. It's very, very popular. You get a great solid understanding of ChatGPT and what goes into the large language model, but you also get to do it with the instructor and do it hands-on and experiment with the different prompts that you have. As well as we have a brand new course, Copilot for Microsoft 365 administrators. So those of you, this is really nice. How many of you have really seen too many Microsoft tech classes that are one day? But this is a one-day class that'll help you get your feet wet for 365 administration in Copilot. And then we have a few others here that are really will help you get going. Microsoft Azure AI Fundamentals. It's a great overview for your tech staff on the things that are involved in getting started with using AI in your corporation. And of course, our Microsoft Copilot class, much like our ChatGPT class, also hands-on and a great overview of what you can do in Copilot. And I recommend both the ChatGPT and the Microsoft Copilot for your end users to help give them some ideas how they can use AI to, improve their work. All of these can be offered privately. And so if you have a group, we can certainly do that. You have the open enrollments here. We'll also send you a link to the course schedule for the AI courses. Like I said, there's 59 different titles, 259 course dates, and many, many, many guaranteed to run classes. So I think that's all I have for you. Maury, I'm going to send it back to you for any questions.
Thanks, Michelle, a lot. Thanks for applying all your experience to AI as you've done over the years with a lot of the new technologies. We'll take Q&A. We've got a few minutes left, and you're welcome to use the question box. I'll use first names only to protect the innocent because some of you suggested what you'd like to learn when you first signed up. So we'll wander through there as you put your questions in. David, you put a new question in asking will the links that you've seen, including legal and turning off Copilot in the materials, be in the materials this afternoon? The answer is yes. And the reason I put that in there, David, was that link, the content on that link, I think has changed dramatically over time. And I want you to have the latest one and not using old instructions from Microsoft. Hazel, when you signed up, hopefully I've pronounced your first name properly. You asked more about Microsoft Copilot. Hopefully you got what you came for today. And Barry, you asked about Teams AI. Certainly playing with it and seeing what the feature set is. The Teams Premium feature set, we saw that it overlaps a little bit with Copilot for Teams, which is part of the 365 Copilot. But understanding the distinctions between Teams Regular, the Teams Premium for $7 a month, just need to license the organizers, and the $30 a month portion teams of in Copilot for 365 Microsoft, understanding the distinctions between them is worth doing, and there are some slides in the deck that will absolutely help you do that today. Microsoft has actually moved some of the features from free to paid and then back again. So they've definitely confused people, and that's why spending some time on the slides that will be in today's packet may be worth doing. Hopefully you got what you came for, Barry. Thanks for coming. David, we just talked about ability to read 365 documents in OneDrive and SharePoint, and the answer is that is doable because that's what Microsoft 365 Copilot is, but you do have the caveats of the sensitive data that you've got to be preparing yourself for. David, welcome today. Security and governance practices. That is the long lead time items, the governance side. We actually had some sessions several years ago on SharePoint governance. They were high in participation, but not a lot of people wanted to make the movements necessary, partly because it's very detailed. Substantial licensing is needed, and people have other priorities. But today, if you're going to use Copilot for M365, you've got to have your governance in place. And so I'm afraid we might have been 1 or 2 years early in our webinars, but now's the time. Welcome today, David. Ryan, you were interested in prompt engineering, and Michelle gave you a quick look at it, but it is covered extensively in our 3.5-hour ChatGPT course, I think, and Michelle can give you more information as to what other courses contain prompt engineering. It's important. Purvi, welcome. Whatever you can teach us, great. Thanks. Hope you got something. Using AI for business functions, Slade. I hope you found something today. We use it extensively internally for helping us write, helping us summarize, but AI does cover. We could spend a week in a webinar. That's a lot of pizzas just talking about different ways AI is being used. I wanted to give you just a few pictures of that. I'll stop for any questions in the question box if there are more. Purvi, you were asking, could you please give us slides? And the answer is it'll be in today's packet. Absolutely. We want you to have a copy. Mike, welcome today. Which users are best to license for? Which users would be best to license for? Certainly your early adopters, for starters, those that are doing data analysis, those who are doing extensive writing, especially your proposal folks. All of those might be early users. Any of the digital transformation people that you have on staff, and certainly in large firms, that's a title that's being tossed around for sure. Those might be the earliest folks. Jamie, welcome. How to better utilize AI. Bradley, you're looking for how others are using M365 in their office. It's a little bit out of the scope of today's presentation and could take quite a while. But I think a pilot group might be in your future, and because you're part of a very large organization, you've got to watch that governance very closely before we can make that decision to go to Copilot for 365 in any production kind of way. Diane, welcome. Different versions of Copilot. Hopefully you've seen that today. How it can be used by end users, risk to the organizations, very important topics. I hope you got what you came for today, Diane. Samuel, you talked about policies on uses, how it's being used today. You saw some pieces of that, and policies on usage, some of the caveats in governance you saw today. I'll take other thoughts before we close out. We've got a couple minutes left. I'll be quiet for 30 seconds so you can put your thoughts in the question box if you have them. Any other thoughts for today that you'd like to get out in the open? If not, we appreciate your time. We'll turn the 1 minute left back to you. And thanks for joining us today. I hope you got something from it. Thanks again.